Crossdressing laws were a series of legislations passed from the 1840s up into the 1930s in the United States that were part of anti-vice or public indecency legislation. And essentially, they made it a criminal act to wear clothing that was associated with the opposite sex. Oftentimes, police would look at people's bodies to find a perceived incongruity. So if you were too short, or if your hands were too big, or you seemed to have a little facial hair, they would often do forcible strip searches to identify people's genitals. They would take you to the jail, and oftentimes they would stage a photo. And the idea was, we want to sensationalize this image so that people can learn how to identify other cross-dressers. A lot of fashion historians say in the early 1800s is when you began to see the cementing of the suit as the male form and the gown with a corset as the female form. The reason that you see this hyper emphasis between women's garments and men's garments is because pants made men's legs literal, which allowed people to see them as rational, autonomous, whereas the clothing designed for women were completely impractical. So fashion becomes then a way to justify the separation of spheres that confine the respectable Victorian woman to the home and allow the respectable Victorian men to be a subject worthy of the public and the rights. Fashion is part of a larger symbolic economy of race and of gender. When European imperialists and colonists came to indigenous lands, one of the things that they would consistently write about is the public gender nonconformity in indigenous communities. They would bemoan how men were wearing accessories or dresses, or how women were not actually confined to the domestic sphere. And this characterization was essential for the dehumanization of indigenous people and racialized people, because that sort of made it seem like Europeans were here to come and fix the quote-unquote barbaric or savage culture. Whenever white people were being arrested for cross-dressing, the news would often reference how it's kind of like in the Native American community. Because of the gay liberation movement in the 70s, that's when you began to see these anti-cross-dressing laws disappear. We forget that the reason that people resisted at Stonewall and at the Compton cafeteria riots before was because of this anti-cross-dressing legislation, which was specifically used to target LGBTQ people. What I argue, and a lot of my peers argue, is that actually, even though the laws weren't on the books, they still structure our imagination. While we might be comfortable now with someone who's perceived as a woman wearing pants, we're still deeply uncomfortable with someone perceived as a man wearing a dress. We still gender inanimate objects like clothing and scents and colors. And for me, if we really want to do justice to this legacy of resistance, of people being criminalized and indeed even killed, then it's imperative that we degender fashion.